The mail-order bride never came, so the cowboy tracked the wagon wreckage and found her barely breathing. Red Fern, Wyoming, January 1885. The blizzard was the kind folks whispered about for years afterward. Snow piled thick as a man's thigh, muffling horse hooves and swallowing fences whole. The wind came down from the northern range like a whip, carving the plains into white silence. Red Fern, a speck of a town on the Wyoming frontier, was nearly cut off. No mail, no wagon roads, no train whistle. Life shrank to warm stoves and the quiet breath of livestock in locked barns. Jonas Mercer stood alone beneath the awning of the depot station, snow clinging to the brim of his hat. He had been there every day for the past week, just after dawn, long after the townsfolk stopped checking. In his gloved hand, a letter, worn soft at the edges, folded too many times. The ink, faint now, still held the shape of hope. Behind him, small boots crunched in the snow. "Pa?" a child's voice called. He turned. Ellie, 6 years old, held her rag doll to her chest, wrapped in her late mother's shawl. Her nose was pink from the cold, her eyes round with something harder than curiosity. "She's not coming, is she, Miss Evelyn?" Jonas looked down at her, kneeling slowly until they were eye to eye. "She was supposed to," he said softly. "She left St. Louis before Christmas. But maybe," Ellie's voice wavered, "maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she don't want to be my new ma." Jonas's jaw tensed. He looked out toward the snow-swallowed road where no wagon had come. "No, Ellie," he said, voice steady. "She didn't change her mind. Something went wrong." Ellie nodded, like she understood more than any child should. That evening, the livery doors burst open. A driver stumbled in, half frozen, his coat stiff with ice. "They're sayin' he came in from Black Creek," someone whispered. Jonas didn't wait. He pushed past the crowd. "You drove the St. Louis party?" The man nodded, voice cracked from windburn. "Wagon tipped. Black Creek crossing." Ice gave out, went sideways. Jonas's heart climbed into his throat. Was there a young woman, Evelyn Ashford? The driver frowned, thinking. Brown hair, kinda quiet, helped folks load their bags, sweet thing. Yeah, she was there. He swallowed. "But when we crashed, folks scattered. I didn't see her after. Some got hurt. Some walked off to find help. She might have been one of them." The words hit Jonas harder than the wind outside. That night, after Ellie had gone to sleep, Jonas sat alone in the barn. A lantern flickered beside him. In his lap, the letter. "I do not fear hardship, Mr. Mercer. If your heart is kind, and your daughter in need of warmth, then perhaps that is a life I could call mine." His thumb traced the faded ink. A soft sound behind him. "Ellie, barefoot, wrapped in a quilt. You're gonna go find her, aren't you?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Yes. If she's out there, hurt or lost, I have to." The next morning, as the wind howled, Jonas saddled Boulder, his strongest horse. He packed a wool blanket, lantern, coil of rope, dried meat, and a pouch of medicine. Evelyn's letter he tucked close to his chest. The sheriff met him at the edge of town. "You're a fool, Jonas. Black Creek'll bury a man in 10 minutes. Then I'll ride faster," Jonas replied. Sheriff sighed. "You've got a little girl to think of." "That's why I'm going," Jonas said. "She deserves to know that when someone you care about is lost, you don't just wait for spring." Ellie ran toward him, cheeks wet. "Pa, don't let the snow swallow you." He crouched, hugged her close. "I'll come back, and if Miss Evelyn's out there, I'll bring her home." He climbed into the saddle, turned toward the storm. Snow flurried around him like ash. "Evelyn," he whispered, "stay alive. I'm coming for you." Then he rode into the white, where no tracks remained. Jonas rode through the thick woods where snow muffled the world. His breath came out in bursts of fog, and the lantern hanging from his saddle swung in rhythm with Boulder's heavy steps. Trees creaked under the weight of snow, and the wind whispered things no man should listen to. By the second day, the blizzard had passed, leaving a brittle silence behind. Jonas's fingers ached from cold, but he pressed on, eyes scanning the landscape like a man reading scripture. It was mid-afternoon when he spotted the old ranger station, a crooked timber structure half buried in snow. Smoke trickled from the chimney. Life. Jonas dismounted and pushed the door open. Inside, a weak fire crackled. 4 people huddled near it, 2 men, a woman with a bandaged arm, and an older lady with snow-white hair tucked under a bonnet. They looked up, startled. "I'm looking for someone," Jonas said, removing his hat. "Evelyn Ashford. She was in the wagon from St. Louis." The older woman leaned forward. "You her intended?" "Yes." Her voice softened. "Then sit a minute, son. You best hear what I got to tell." Jonas sat, heart tight. "She was with us, all right. A quiet thing, but kind. Helped me tend the fire, wrapped my arm when it split open." The woman lifted her bandaged limb. "What happened at Black Creek?" Jonas asked. "The road gave out," said one of the men. "Wheels slid, horses panicked, whole wagon rolled." Jonas clenched his jaw. "People were screaming," the woman continued. "But that girl, Evelyn, she stayed calm. She pulled a little boy out from under a board before she even checked herself. And then? We couldn't stay. The cold was coming in fast. Some folks tried to hike back east. She said she'd go find help, headed north by mistake." Jonas frowned. "North?" "Aye," the old woman said. "Took the wrong ridgeline. I tried to stop her, but she was determined. Left just before dawn." Jonas stood, thanked them, and stepped back into the snow. He didn't need sleep. He needed signs. By late afternoon, he found one. A scrap of blue fabric fluttering from a thorn bush. He reached for it with numb fingers, heart racing. Wool, frayed and torn, the exact shade Evelyn had mentioned in her letters. A few feet ahead, snow had collapsed inward. Jonas stepped carefully, eyes narrowing. There, faint impressions beneath a thin crust of ice. Footprints, small ones, a trail leading deeper into the forest. He followed them, slowly at first, then faster as adrenaline warmed his veins. Suddenly, Boulder snorted and stopped. Jonas scanned the snowbank and saw it. Another clue. A smear of blood, not fresh, but not yet erased by wind. A drag mark led to a fallen log, and beside it, a small leather pouch. Jonas dropped to his knees, hands trembling as he opened it. Inside, a worn Bible, edges damp and frozen stiff, and a slip of paper. He unfolded it with care, his breath catching. "Jonas Mercer, Red Fern, I hope I will be worthy to be your wife." The handwriting was slanted but delicate. Evelyn's. He stared at it for a long time, snow falling silently around him. Then, without a word, he folded the note and placed it next to his heart. "I'm coming, Evelyn," he whispered. "Even if it's through snow or silence or death itself, I will find you." He mounted Boulder again, eyes locked on the path ahead where the snow dipped, where someone small and brave had walked, before vanishing into the white. The ridge broke open into a narrow clearing, and Jonas reined Boulder to a stop. Ahead lay the wreckage. The wagon had splintered like a matchstick under a fallen boulder, one massive slab of mountain rock resting where the carriage's heart once was. Shattered wheels peeked from under snowdrifts. Pieces of broken wood and scattered cargo littered the area like bones, but no bodies. Jonas scanned the scene with narrowed eyes, heart pounding. No blood, no sign of a burial. That meant one thing: someone had gotten out alive. He dismounted slowly, crunching over the snow toward the wreck. The wind carried a strange silence here, like even the trees held their breath. Then he saw it, a thread of blue caught on a bare branch. He reached up and tugged, gently. Wool, soft, frayed at the edge. The same blue as the shawl Evelyn had described in her letters. His breath came faster. He moved forward, eyes sharp, scanning low. A few feet away, the snow looked disturbed. Not footprints this time, just the faint drag of a palm. Then another, and another. Jonas dropped to his knees. The indentations were small, shallow, as if someone had crawled, barely, using only their hands. He brushed snow away slowly, reverently, following the trail as it curved toward the tree line. "Evelyn," he whispered, "you fought like hell, didn't you?" The trail led downward toward a dry creek bed, half covered in drifted snow and dead pine needles. He nearly missed it. At first it looked like a snowbank, then his eyes caught the shape, something too still, too deliberate. A small hand reached just barely above the snow line, fingers curled against the cold. Jonas's heart stopped. He dropped beside her. "Evelyn," his voice cracked. She lay half buried, her face pale as the snow, lips tinged purple. Her chest rose in shallow, fluttering gasps. Her eyes were closed, lashes dusted with frost. "God," Jonas whispered. "No, no, no, no." With shaking hands, he pulled off his coat and wrapped it tightly around her. He cradled her head gently, brushed snow from her cheeks, and leaned close, his cheek against her lips. A breath, barely, but it was there. "I'm here," he whispered. "You made it. Don't you quit on me now." He rubbed her hands between his own, trying to bring warmth back. Then, a miracle. Her lips moved. "Joe? Nas?" she breathed, barely audible. "I said I'd come." Her voice vanished into the wind, and her head lolled against his arm. Jonas didn't wait. He gathered her up in both arms, rising to his feet with a grunt. The weight was nothing. The urgency was everything. The forest was a blur as he moved, snow stinging his face, branches clawing his shoulders. "Hold on," he muttered. "Just hold on." Twice the ground gave way beneath his boots, and he nearly fell into hidden ravines. Once, his leg slipped down to the knee in a crevasse, and he had to hoist her higher, biting back a shout. Boulder followed, silent and steady, like he knew the gravity of the moment. Evelyn moaned faintly once, then went still again. Jonas didn't stop. He spotted the roof of an old trapper's cabin just before dusk, a gray slant half sunken into snow, smoke long dead in its chimney. He stumbled up the porch steps, kicked the frozen door open with one boot. Inside, dark, dusty, cold, but shelter. He lay Evelyn down on a pile of old pelts near the hearth. Then he collapsed beside her, chest heaving. "Please," he whispered, forehead to hers. "Don't leave me. Don't leave Ellie." Outside, the wind screamed down from the ridgeline. Inside, the fire had yet to start, but the will to survive had never burned brighter. Jonas stripped off his soaked gloves and went straight for the hearth. His fingers trembled as he tore through the abandoned cabin's supplies, old flint, dry moss in a tin box, scraps of birch bark. He sparked the fire like a man fighting death itself. Within minutes, a flame caught. The orange glow spread across the walls, flickering shadows across Evelyn's face. She was still unconscious, cheeks white as linen, lashes stuck together. Jonas hesitated, then turned his back and began to unlace her frozen cloak, carefully pulling the soaked fabric away from her shoulders without looking. He took off his own dry shirt and wrapped it around her, layer by layer. Then he laid thick pelts over her small frame and leaned close to press his hand to her forehead. Burning, a fever. He searched the cabin frantically and found what he prayed for, dried willow bark, tucked in a glass jar behind a stack of broken traps. He boiled snow over the fire and steeped the leaves, holding the steaming cup to her lips. "Come on, Evelyn," he whispered. "Come back to me." Hours passed. Snow whispered against the window panes. The fire crackled and spat. And then, a soft cough. Jonas spun around. Her eyes fluttered open, pale blue and unfocused. "Jonas?" she croaked. He dropped to his knees beside her. "You're safe. You're in a cabin, just south of the ridge. I found you." She blinked slowly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to be this hard." He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, light as snow. "Don't ever apologize for surviving." Her lips trembled, but this time it wasn't from the cold. "I was trying to come to you," she whispered. "I wanted to be the kind of woman worthy of the letters you wrote." Jonas swallowed. And I wanted to be the man you believed I was. There was silence between them, but not an empty one. It was the quiet that comes before something sacred. Jonas sat down beside her, back to the wall, watching the fire dance. My daughter's name is Ellie, he said quietly. She's 6, brave like her mother, talks too much when she's nervous. She still sleeps with the doll her mama left behind. Evelyn turned her head weakly toward him. I always dreamed of meeting her, she said. I wondered if she'd like me, or if she'd know I was scared too. Jonas looked at her. She hoped you'd smile more than her ma did. I think you do. Evelyn gave a soft, tired laugh. Only when I can feel my face. He let that smile live for a second. Then his expression darkened. Outside, a low howl echoed through the trees. Jonas rose, his hand going to the rifle near the door. Wolves. He peered out through a cracked shutter, eyes catching the glint of movement between the trees, shapes moving closer. He turned back to Evelyn, who was trying to sit up. Stay here, he said, helping her gently toward the farthest corner. He stacked some crates and laid a pelt over them to conceal her as best he could. Her hand clutched his sleeve. You won't leave me? He knelt beside her, voice low, steady. I'll stand between you and whatever's out there, I promise. He walked to the door, loaded his rifle, and stood with his silhouette against the firelight, tall, still, and fierce. Outside, the snow whispered, but inside, the warmth returned, not just to the air, but to a heart once frozen in fear. The wolves came when the wind dropped, as if the silence had called them. Jonas stood tall before the cabin door, rifle cocked, eyes trained on the dark beyond the snow. The fire behind him cast long shadows, and Evelyn, hidden behind a wall of crates, watched his silhouette, rigid, ready. A growl cut through the night, then the glint of eyes. 3, 4, maybe 5 sets. Jonas fired into the air. The gunshot cracked like thunder, echoing down the frozen ravine. Some of the shapes retreated, but not all. One wolf lunged from the tree line. Damn it, Jonas muttered, stepping forward, rifle swinging too slow. The wolf was on him before he could aim again. Teeth flashed. Jonas shoved the barrel into its ribs, but the beast twisted, snarling, clawing at his coat. They crashed into the snow. The rifle fell. He wrestled the animal, hands gripping fur, trying to keep those jaws from his throat. Blood stained the snow. His shoulder ripped. Pain flared hot. Inside, Evelyn heard the scuffle. Her breath caught, her body still weak, but her spirit surged. She grabbed the thick iron ladle from the fireplace and stumbled to the corner. A rusted barrel stood there. She lifted the lid, revealing old tools and scrap metal. With all the strength she had, she grabbed the heavy wooden lid and began slamming it down onto the barrel over and over again. Bang, bang, bang. The sound was sharp, unnatural, an echoing clang that sliced through the snarls and growls. The other wolves froze. Then, slowly, they backed into the trees. The wolf on Jonas snarled once more before turning and bolting after its pack. Jonas rolled over, panting, blood dripping from his torn sleeve. Evelyn dropped the lid, her knees giving out. She collapsed against the crate, breath shallow. He crawled to her, cradling her shoulders. "Why did you do that?" he gasped. "You're burning up and half frozen." "You were out there alone," she said, voice shaking. "I couldn't sit and do nothing." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Don't ever scare me like that again," he whispered. "I thought I'd lost you." Later, once the fire was stoked again, and Jonas had wrapped his bleeding shoulder, he sat beside Evelyn on the floor. She shivered slightly, and he pulled a blanket over her shoulders. Then he reached into his coat pocket and took out the torn scarf she had worn when he found her. The edges were frayed, threads loose. Quietly, he pulled a small bone needle from a pouch on his belt. With fingers still red and raw, he began to stitch the scarf using thread he had twisted from strips of fabric earlier. Evelyn watched in silence. "This isn't much," Jonas said, not looking at her, "but I figured it'd keep you warmer, and maybe remind you of that day." "What day?" "The day I found you. half buried in snow, but still breathing. He finished the stitch, tied the thread gently, and handed it to her. She took it slowly, fingers tracing the fresh seam. "Thank you," she said. But her eyes held more than gratitude. A quiet tremor passed through her, and she leaned her head back against the wall, cheeks flushed from fever. Her voice was almost a whisper. "I'm not what you think I am." Jonas turned to her, still and listening. "I'm not pretty," she said. "Not like the pictures people imagine. I have no dowry, no family name. I wasn't supposed to make it out of St. Louis. I thought, when you saw me, you'd change your mind." He reached for her hand and placed it over his chest. "What I saw," he said gently, "was the woman who walked into a blizzard to keep her word." He leaned closer, voice rough with emotion. "I fell for the heart behind every letter. That's the part of you I cherish." She blinked, eyes glassy. "I wanted so badly to be enough." "You are," he said. "You were, even before I found you." She closed her eyes, and this time, when she leaned against his shoulder, her body relaxed, not from exhaustion, but from safety. The wind howled outside, but inside the cabin, the quiet was filled with something stronger than fear, something that, for the first time, felt like the beginning of home. The snow had begun to melt, leaving slush in the streets of red fern and soft patches of mud along the wooden walkways. The storm had passed, and in its place, sunlight filtered through wisps of cloud, warming the bones of a town long buried in winter. Jonas Mercer rode into town with Evelyn in front of him, wrapped in a heavy wool blanket. His arms circled her, not tightly, but securely, as if part of him feared she might vanish if he let go. People paused to watch. Old Mr. Thorne leaned on his hammer outside the forge. Miss Clara squinted from the bakery window. Curiosity followed them, not unkind, just quiet and constant, as only small towns know how to show. Near the alley, behind the mercantile, a small figure burst into view. "Pa!" Ellie called, her boots splashing through muddy puddles. She stopped short when she saw Evelyn. Wide-eyed, she whispered, "Pa, did you bring back a snow angel?" Evelyn smiled, pale but touched. Jonas dismounted and helped her down. "This is Miss Evelyn," he said. "She'll be staying with Mrs. Hattie for a little while." Ellie studied her, then offered a muddy hand. "Hi, Miss Evelyn. I saved you one of my best cookies." Evelyn crouched carefully, her legs still weak, and took the child's hand with care. "That's the kindest welcome I've ever had." Evelyn's room at Mrs. Hattie's was small but warm. Jonas had insisted she recover properly, giving her space and dignity, but Ellie didn't believe in space, not with people she liked. The next morning, she arrived carrying cornbread and her beloved ragdoll, Beatrice. "She's for you," Ellie said solemnly, "until you get your own. She's good at keeping nightmares away." Evelyn sat on the bed, touched. "Thank you, Ellie. She's perfect." From that moment, Evelyn became part of Ellie's days. She braided her hair, helped her sew a dress for Beatrice, and listened as the child shared soft memories of her mother. "Sometimes," Ellie whispered, "I think Mama sent you, so Pa wouldn't be sad anymore." Evelyn's eyes stung. She kissed Ellie's forehead. "Maybe your mama and mine are watching us together." Each evening, Jonas came to visit. They sat on the porch with quilts and tea, talking softly. He told her about the ranch, how Boulder ignored the stable hand, how the cows had wandered again. He mentioned Ellie humming while brushing her teeth. "She never used to do that," he said. Evelyn smiled. "That's because she's happy." "And you?" he asked gently. She looked down. "I'm learning how to be." One afternoon, Jonas took her riding. She clung to the saddle, stiff but determined. When she nearly slipped, Jonas steadied her. "Don't worry," he said, laughing. "You'll get it." Evelyn laughed too. "I'm just glad the horse doesn't judge me." They rode to the ridge behind the ranch, where green shoots were starting to break through the brown. "This," she said, "was never in your letters, but it's the best part." That night, Evelyn tucked Ellie into bed. The girl held her hand tightly. "Will you read to me?" she asked. Evelyn opened the worn storybook and began. Halfway through, Ellie looked up. "Do you ever want to stay? Like stay forever with us?" The question struck harder than Evelyn expected. She smoothed Ellie's hair. "I think about it more than I should," she whispered. Later, Evelyn stood by her window, watching the night settle over Red Fern. The last patches of snow were fading. Moonlight lit the road, the porch where Jonas had stood, the hills where her life had nearly ended. And now? Now she was thinking of the life that might follow. Maybe, she thought, fingers brushing the cool glass, this is where I was meant to come all along. It began with whispers. By the end of the week, the whispers had teeth. "She must be running from something," murmured Mrs. Crane outside the Mercantile. "I heard she never even had family in St. Louis. Just showed up on a mail wagon and latched onto Jonas Mercer. Poor Ellie. That girl needs a mother, not some stranger with secrets." Evelyn felt it all. Every pause in conversation, every sideways glance when she stepped onto the boardwalk. What began as curiosity had curdled into suspicion. The widows watched her most closely, eyes sharp with judgment. They saw scandal in every quiet moment, every smile not returned, every time Jonas walked past without speaking of her. She tried to walk tall, but the weight of their stares bent her shoulders a little more each day. Then came the blow she couldn't ignore. At the saloon, loud enough for half the town to hear, the wagon driver from Black Creek spat into the snow and said, "I remember what she said when the wagon tipped. I can't go back there." Said it like her life depended on it. He slapped cards on the table. "Don't sound like no innocent bride to me." By morning, Evelyn was no longer the angel Jonas had carried through a blizzard. She was the question everyone wanted answered. She stopped going to market. She kept her curtains drawn at Mrs. Hattie's, watching the muddy street without stepping out. Children played below her window. She smiled at their laughter, but never opened the glass. When Ellie knocked one afternoon, Evelyn hesitated. "Come in," she whispered. Ellie climbed onto the bed and swung her feet. "Is it true people don't like you because you weren't born here?" she asked. Evelyn blinked hard. "Maybe," she said softly. "Sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand." Ellie nodded, then smiled. "But I'm not afraid of you." Jonas heard the whispers too. "You sure about her?" the sheriff asked. "A woman who comes all that way alone, that's a story. Just hope you know how it ends." At the feed store, another man muttered, "Mercer's got himself a mystery woman. She'll bring trouble." Jonas didn't answer. His jaw clenched so tight it ached. That evening, he knocked on Evelyn's door. She opened it slowly, revealing a half-packed bag on the bed. "You leaving?" he asked. She nodded. "I can't stay. They're talking about you. About Ellie. I won't let that fall on your family." He exhaled, deep and slow. "Evelyn, we found each other for a reason. Don't let people who never knew you decide what comes next." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I thought I could take it, but every day, I'm holding my breath, waiting for someone to call me a liar, or worse." Then, a soft voice broke the silence. "Are you really going?" Ellie asked. Neither of them had seen her enter. She stood in the corner, clutching her doll, eyes wide and pleading. Evelyn's heart cracked. She dropped to her knees, arms around the little girl. "I don't want you to go," Ellie whispered. "I like you." Jonas watched them, something tightening in his chest. He knelt beside them. "If you're leaving because you want something else, I'll let you go," he said quietly. "But if you're leaving because of fear, you're letting them take your future. Red Fern doesn't get to decide who you are. You do." Evelyn looked up, hand resting on Ellie's hair. "I'm just so tired of running," she whispered. Jonas replied, "Then stop. Stay with us." Silence filled the room. Evelyn stood slowly, walking to the window. She didn't speak. Outside, the town was still. The sun had dipped below the rooftops. The world held its breath. Jonas stepped closer, voice gentle. "Ellie and we want you here. The question is, do you?" Evelyn didn't answer. Not yet. But something had shifted, and the storm inside her had started to calm. The snow had melted in streaks along rooftops, dripping steadily from the eaves. Red Fern was waking from its long winter. Morning light spilled across the muddy street like a promise. Evelyn stood outside the boarding house, the door closing behind her with a soft click. She stepped onto the porch, hands trembling. She had barely slept. Words unsaid had kept her awake, pressing against her chest like frost on glass. She moved down the steps, then out into the open. Down the lane, past the mercantile and the frost-covered church bell, the familiar trail toward Jonas's ranch appeared. She saw the wooden fence, then the porch, then Ellie, already outside, bundled in her shawl, eyes wide with surprise. Without hesitation, the girl ran. Evelyn barely had time to kneel before Ellie flew into her arms, hugging with all the strength a 6-year-old could give. "I'm sorry if I made you sad," Ellie whispered into Evelyn's coat, "but I don't want you to go. Not ever." Evelyn clutched her close, heart aching. That one sentence, the purity of it, dissolved so much of her fear. Behind them, the porch creaked. Jonas stepped into the sunlight, boots quiet against the boards. He didn't speak at first. His eyes met hers, calm, steady, kind. "I don't know what you've decided," he said, "but wherever you stand, I'll be on the side that has you in it." Evelyn rose slowly, still holding Ellie's hand. She looked to Jonas, then beyond him, toward the hills and fields, this place that had nearly buried her, and the man who had refused to let her go. "I've run my whole life," she said, "but when I was lying in that snow, broken and afraid, I only thought of you and Ellie. I don't want to run anymore. I want a family. I want to stay with you." Ellie laughed and clapped, joy lighting her face. Jonas stepped closer and pulled something from his pocket, a simple silver ring, polished but worn. "It's not to bind you," he said, "just to remind you, you're not alone. Evelyn Grace Ashford, will you stay and be my wife?" Tears filled her eyes, but her smile was soft and sure. "Yes," she whispered, "yes, I'll stay." Red Fern changed, but not because people forgot what they once whispered. They simply saw something stronger. They saw Evelyn at the church, pouring tea, helping children with their letters. They saw her guiding Ellie's small hand as she learned to write her name. They saw the way Jonas looked at her, as if a silent prayer had been answered. The judgment faded. The whispers stopped. In their place came respect, and maybe even a little awe. One golden afternoon, the three climbed the hill behind the ranch. Jonas lifted Ellie onto Boulder's back, his hand steady on the reins. Evelyn walked beside them, wind brushing her hair across her cheek. The snow had mostly vanished, green shoots pushing through the soft, damp earth. Jonas reached for Evelyn's hand. "The first time I found you," he said, "snow covered your shoulders. Now look at you, standing in sunlight like spring itself." She smiled, fingers lacing with his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for finding me twice, once in the snow and once in my fear. And in that quiet land, where wind could bury or bless, where silence tested hearts, they built something lasting. Not just a house, but a home, of voices that soothed, arms that held, and love that stayed. A family, a beginning, a story worth remembering." If this story of Evelyn, Jonas, and little Ellie stirred something in your heart, if you believe love can bloom even in the harshest winters, then don't let this be the last time we meet. At Wild West Love Stories, we bring you tales of resilience, hope, and the kind of romance that stands tall against storms and silence. Every story is a reminder that even in a world of dust and distance, love finds a way. So go ahead, hit the hype button, and subscribe to our channel. Let the prairie winds carry you to the next unforgettable chapter.